During Cy Spurrier's Legion of X, Nightcrawler was turned into an unwitting assassin for ORCHIS. And while we always knew the reason why, now we know exactly how. Now we know how ORCHIS turned one of Marvel's most lovable mutants into a cold-blooded killer. What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, I'm gonna be talking about Uncanny Spider-Man #2, written by Cy Spurrier with art by Lee Garbett and color by Matt Mia. This issue, we don't get a lot of answers to the most burning questions I think a lot of you, as well as other readers, have had about the Uncanny Spider-Man series, namely the identity, or rather the origins of the BAMF. We don't get a confirmation on any of that, so you won't find that in this issue whatsoever, and I'm not really even going to talk about it. However, we do get some information about why Nightcrawler was an assassin for ORCHIS. This was all stuff that goes back to the Legion of X series. I've done a video about it. You can go check it out up here if you want to know more about the circumstances that were surrounding that. But one of the things that came out was that we knew that Margalie Zardos, Nightcrawler's adopted mother, we knew that she was behind his being turned into a more monstrous version of himself. It was a trick that she used on a lot of the mutants on Earth to turn them into more monstrous creatures to help aid ORCHIS's narrative in the notion that mutants are dangerous. And Nightcrawler was no different. He was turned into a more demonic looking version of himself for a few months worth of publication, at least. And what we didn't know is that while, yes, magic turned him into a monster, but it was human ingenuity that allowed ORCHIS to control Nightcrawler the way that they did. We're introduced to a new character, technically a character that we were introduced to in the previous issue, but we actually get a little bit more information about that character in this issue, and that is one Wilson Travers Jr., who, if that name for whatever reason sounds even the vaguest of familiar to you, then you are probably one of the few people who remembers this throwaway character from Thor number 273 in 1978. There was a character by the name of Dr. Wilson Travers. Now, while this character is not the same character, the character we're focused on here is the son of that original character. Dr. Wilson Travers Sr. only ever appeared in that one issue of Thor. He was a one and done, never to be seen or heard from again, and was a former employee of Tony Stark's. This version of the character, however, it's one of those situations where apparently ORCHIS was looking for the dad and ended up getting the son. But in this particular instance, it actually all works out because, as we learn, it's actually Dr. Travers Jr. who was responsible for why Nightcrawler was working for ORCHIS. The device that we see planted on Rhino's head in this issue, which also explains why Rhino is working with ORCHIS. It was one of those situations I was worried that maybe, Rhino got tricked into working for the bad guys again after him trying to go on this whole redemption arc. And like, no, he actually was subjugated by them and the technology Travers used on him, a device that allows ORCHIS to control people however they see fit. And this is something that's not going to be terribly uncommon. It's actually a running theme in at least roughly two other X books that dropped this week, which, by the way, there were 7 X books that came out this week, so don't be shocked if at least one of them does not get a video. I'm still technically trying to do videos for the ones that came out last week. It's been a whole thing. When you're trying to write, draw, and color your own comic, it's very difficult to keep up with everyone else's comics. But all that aside, yes, ORCHIS is delving into psionic tampering, and it's also something we've seen over on the Ms. Marvel side of things as well, and it's definitely happening here. However, I think the thing that's actually going to keep ORCHIS from diving too terribly deep into this technology is, well, for one, while it does seem incredibly effective and it's very difficult for Nightcrawler to remove the device, the reason why it's not going to go anywhere or any much further than this is because Dr. Travers Jr. works directly for Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture. Vulture is the one who has been calling the shots here. This is why we saw over on the Astonishing Iceman side of things, which, by the way, there is a video coming out for that. I just haven't put it out yet, but in that issue, we saw Spider-Man attacked by one of Vulture's hounds. It was actually the character Feral. Some of you may remember her from X-Force and various other X-related titles. But yes, he's using the transmode virus to turn mutants into effectively hounds, very similar to what you would associate with the character of Ahab. And that is his focus. He doesn't really care about mind control, at least not in the terms of what Travers Jr. is trying to do. But the thing that's really useful about this is, and I think this is where Travers Jr.'s tech actually outshines Vulture's, is just in the sense that it doesn't just work on mutants, it works on everybody. He's clearly using this on Rhino, who is not a mutant at all. And it clearly worked on a character like Nightcrawler, and it very likely works on lots of other people. And if ORCHIS was actually able to get this technology out into the world, using it on some of Marvel's most powerful heroes and villains. Now, once again, all of this that's going on here is pretty on brand for ORCHIS in terms of subjugating people, taking away their free will and using them for their own ends. Something else that's very on brand here is, once again, we already knew that Silver Sable was going to be one of the foils in the series, and Silver Sable often tends to work for people who aren't necessarily good people. They're not always good guys, and they're not always bad guys. Sometimes they're actually more bad guys than good guys, but still, Silver Sable just goes where the money is. That's all she cares about.
Where's the money, Lebowski?
And while I had hypothesized that we're probably going to see some kind of budding love interest between Silver Sable and Nightcrawler in the series, that is more or less what's going on here. We see Sable getting extra thirsty for Nightcrawler in this issue. She sees the Uncanny Spider-Man and her mouth just starts watering for that premium Nightcrawler, if you get what I'm saying. But while I definitely think that, she is gonna be a major player in the series, for however long it runs, a lot of these books that are coming out of Fall of X, that are spun out of the Fall of X, a lot of them aren't running very long. Some of them 4, maybe 5 issues. It's probably not gonna run past 5 issues either, but for however long this runs, Silver Sable will be a play here. The one thing I'm a little bit more concerned about, though, is the inclusion of Dagger in this issue. For those unfamiliar, Dagger of the Marvel Comics duo, Cloak and Dagger. Dagger appears in this, and while some people may question why, the truth of the matter is that Dagger and Cloak also, they are very, as she puts it in this comic, very X adjacent. Some of you may not know the history of Cloak and Dagger, but back in the day, it was heavily implied that Cloak and Dagger were mutants. And honestly, this was a long running theme for Cloak and Dagger, and why they always got drug in to X adjacent stuff off and on throughout the 80s and 90s. But roughly around the time of 2008, 2009, when the Dark Reign story arc was in full effect, all of that was debunked. It was revealed that Cloak and Dagger are not mutants by any stretch of the imagination. They are human mutates, full stop. The involuntary procedure they went through that gave them their powers did not unlock their X genes. It was just a human mutation. And this was hard confirmed by Norman Osborn and Cloak and Dagger during the Dark Reign story arc when he wanted to add them to his Dark X-Men team. And they even said as much. We're not mutants. And Norman Osborn says, that doesn't matter. I hope they do more with Dagger, because she implies that Cloak may have potentially been targeted by Sentinels who are even technically and erroneously targeting her as well, only to realize she's not a mutant. So now she's wondering if maybe Cloak has fallen prey to that. I don't know if they're gonna follow that plot thread or if it's just something they were just throwing out there. I kind of hope Cloak does factor into this for, one reason or another, because Cloak and Dagger, even if you take away the X side of things, Cloak and Dagger are a duo that have always had close connections to Spider-Man. So I'm wondering, with Nightcrawler now operating as a Spider-Man, I'm wondering if maybe they're gonna do something with that. I would love to see it. I would love to see them go in that direction. The only thing I'm not crazy about in regards to Cloak and Dagger and their mention in this issue, they keep going back to the stale trope of Cloak and Dagger constantly getting into arguments and splitting up. It's been such a running gag for so long and been such an overused story arc for them that it's even kind of slick made fun of in this issue. So I'm hoping that Cy Spurrier's not going to go in that direction or not lean into that as much if Cloak and Dagger return in the series. But yeah, I was just like, okay, yeah, we're doing the whole Cloak and Dagger broke up again. Okay, cool. Now, another thing that comes up in this issue too is Mystique, and we don't really get any answers from Mystique either. On top of the Bamf that looks eerily the same color as the Hope Sword the Nightcrawler has been wielding as of late, Mystique, also, we don't get any answers really for her either. I think her misremembering some aspects of Nightcrawler's origin, at least as far as how it was retconned when it was revealed that Mystique was in fact his mother, and also the amnesia she's suffering right now where she thinks that it's roughly around the time that she gave birth. We don't get any more answers there, and honestly, we're not going to get any answers here. That is something that's going to be addressed in the upcoming X-Men Blue one-shot, and that is supposed to recontextualize everything that we know about Nightcrawler and Mystique's history with one another, as well as their origin. So I think all that'll be sussed out there, so there's not really much I can say about that either. What I can say, though, is that this series is, so far, still pretty solid, and I know it's not gonna happen, and I don't expect it to happen either, but it's one of those situations where I feel like Nightcrawler operating as Spider-Man is probably one of the better things, one of the better twists on the, oh, who's the new Spider-Man gimmick that we've seen in the past. And I like it. I like where this is going. And honestly, I would be perfectly fine if for whatever reason, even if Nightcrawler remained doing X-Men shenanigans, I wouldn't be against the idea of him operating as a Spider-Man going forward, even if it was on an off and on basis. I like this. This actually works for him as a character. He's pretty damn good at it, despite the fact that he doesn't have every power that Peter Parker does. He has just enough going on with him that he's different enough, yet similar enough, that all this just works. But anyway, that's everything I really wanted to talk about with Uncanny Spider-Man number 2. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell. So that way you don't miss out on any of my videos throughout the week, plus my live streams every Saturday. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And until next time, let me know what you thought about Uncanny Spider-Man number 2. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.